I want to welcome everyone from Facebook who's watching us now live as we are on our Friday Facebook Live with Tiara. So this session is brought to you by Tiara International, and this is our regular Friday conversation among the Tiara leadership partners. And so we're excited today because we're going to, yes.
We're not.
Oh, all right. It says on mine, it says webinar is streaming live on Facebook. So that's what I thought.
Okay.
So you have to tell me, then I can't tell when we're live.
All right, let me tell you, I'm supposed to click a button that says go live.
Oh, okay, perfect.
So let's hold on for a second.
That's fine.
All right, here we go.
Excellent. Welcome everyone to the Friday Facebook Live session with Tiara International, brought to you by the Tiara Partners. We are delighted to be on air with you today. And for those of you listening live, welcome. And those listening later, we're delighted that you're taking the time to hear what we have to say. I'm Peg Rowe, one of the managing partners for Tiara, and I'm joined today by Beth Ruske. Say hello, Beth.
Hi there, everybody. This is Beth Ruske.
Yep, and Beth is from the U.S., and I'm also joined by Francisca Decker. Francisca, you want to say hello too?
Hello too. Hello.
There you go. And Francisca is joining us from the Netherlands. So we are definitely international in flavor today. And today we thought we would share with you one of our very favorite assessments that we use with both individuals and teams. And it's really great because it really focuses on strengths. And if you know us, you know that in Tiara, we are big believers in focusing on strengths and leveraging our strengths. So today that's going to be part of our discussion. Initially, we'll share a little bit of content information about the Kolbe Index, which is what we'll be featuring today, so that you have, a little understanding of the tool itself. And then Beth and Francisca and I will talk about how we use the Kolbe in our everyday lives, both professionally and personally, and how it shows up. And because we've been using it for a long time, we're pretty tuned in and masterful at it, although we can surprise ourselves. But it'll be fun, and you'll get to see that for the three of us, we all show up a little differently in our strengths, which will give you a feel for how those strengths actually occur in one's real life everywhere. So with that, I'm going to actually turn it over to Beth to really start us on the Tiara model, a little bit about the Tiara model and how this plays with the Kolbe. And just a moment, I'm going to share screen so that everyone can see what we're talking about here.
So the interesting thing, Peg, is you're pulling up that screen.
Yeah.
One of the things in our Tiara model we talk about is learning how to really leverage your strengths. As Peg said, that's one of the first and most important things. So Peg, let us know when you've got the screen up.
I think it's up. Can you not see it?
No.
All right, then it didn't go up, so I need to figure that out.
Okay.
So just keep talking while I do that. I thought we had it going.
Ignore the man behind the curtain or the woman
right.
behind the curtain.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
We may or may not have props for this conversation.
We may not, yes.
The thing about the Tiara model for true leadership is that it's founded in it's founded in both research and experience, in a gender neutral model. It works for men and women. And we in Tiara, we actually try to use this model to really run our lives. It's not just how do I be a leader in my corporate life. It's really how do I show up in my life as a leader. That's why it's a leadership model for life. And there's three main dimensions in the model. The first is around awareness. So true leaders are leaders who are aware. They know their strengths, they know their weaknesses. Most importantly, they know what they value. They know how to leverage other people because of that. The second main dimension is around accomplishments or producing results. So we all have to produce results. We don't get to just sit on the couch and pop bonbons in and hope everything around us goes well. We actually have to be productive people, in our jobs and in our lives, accomplishing things. But the question is, how do you accomplish that? There it goes, Peg. We're close.
Okay, yeah.
Great, thanks. So here's the model that we're talking about. As I mentioned, the awareness is about knowing yourself, getting clarity about that. The other is about this second dimension, which is about accomplishment. And accomplishment, as I said, it's not just about getting results, it's about how you get results. And one of the key dimensions in the accomplishment section there is alignment. How can you align what you do, how you do it, and really integrate your entire life so that you're actually producing results with ease? Notice I'm not saying easily, but I am saying with ease.
Yes.
And then the third dimension.
Key distinction.
It is a huge distinction. People are
Yeah.
like, well, you don't know how hard things are for me to do. It's like, yeah, everyone has hard stuff to do and deal with. You know, it's a question of how we approach it, how we leverage our strengths, how we leverage others, and how we actually integrate it into a holistic perspective of our life. So I don't want to minimize that piece. That's really important. The third dimension is around influence, and it's about being power. It's about owning your power, and it's about being influential in your community, in your life, in your business, wherever you show up. It's about how you show up and whether or not you can influence even when you don't have direct authority. And at the heart of this model, you see that crown there, and at the heart of the model, it's really about inspiration. That crown symbolizes your unique source of inspiration. There's a lot of inspiration in life, and there's a way that we approach life. Each of us is unique for all of us, but this is the thing that actually makes you uniquely you. And finding and tapping into that inspiration is critical in order for you to motivate yourself and keep yourself going on the way and the path that you want to. So that's the basics of the model. What we're talking about today is the Kolbe Index. And the Kolbe is a tool that is fantastic in helping you with the awareness and really knowing your strengths. It also helps you figure out, how do I integrate my strengths with somebody else's strengths? Because everything's a strength. I'm not trying to have everybody look like me. Got off, that'd be, as my two partners here know.
Yeah.
But it would also,
for any of us, yeah.
but it's important to figure out, how do I collaborate and communicate with them? And that comes by being deeply rooted in knowing who you are and why your strengths are so valuable. So Peg, that's all I wanted to talk about in terms of—
Perfect.
Anything else either you, Francisco or Peg, want to add?
No, I think you perfectly positioned it, because we start with our Tiara model in the very beginning with awareness, because we have this belief that when you know yourself, then you can operate more authentically in terms of who you really are, because you're grounded in that self-knowledge. It's not a linear model, so it's not like it always goes around in a circle, but in the beginning, we do begin there. So I want to, before we move on, I want to welcome anyone who may be joining us a minute or two late, and just let you know that we're talking about the Kolbe Index, which is one of our favorite tools and instruments and assessments that we use to identify our strengths so that we can leverage those effectively in our lives. So we want to actually now move into just a little bit of basic information about the Kolbe, so that it feels like you really understand what it is all about. And it really is interesting because of the way that it's been designed. So the woman who designed it, Kathy Kolbe, had this belief that there's an innate way that we problem solve. And this is really a tool that focuses very specifically on problem solving. And you may note the use of the word innate, meaning it's not changing. It's the way that we're born. It's the way that we actually solve problems. But she also recognizes that the things that are measured in the Kolbe are not the only thing that come into play when we're problem solving. So you'll see on the screen that there's the things that she calls the three facets of a person. So the three things that interplay when we are making decisions and problem solving. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the word that says cognition. And this has to do with our existing knowledge that we tap into when we problem solve, any experience we have, training, whatever our defined competencies are. And it's a very specific part of the problem solving effort. And then if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see the word affect or affective. And this has to do with our values and our motivation and our emotions and the general beliefs that we share. And those can change over time, but those have a lot to do with problem solving. In fact, for most problems that we're solving, they actually start with motivation. Something motivates us to solve a problem. So affect is actually usually the beginning of problem solving. And then at the bottom, you'll see a word that many of you may not have heard before if you haven't done the Kolbe, and that word is conation. And that is not a made-up word. That's actually a word derived from the Greek, and it means in Greek it means striving instinct. So conation is all about what it is that we feel we need to do. It's an instinctive place that we start with in terms of how we problem solve. It has to do with our drive, the use of our mental energy, how we focus our time and our energy. And it's really important to understand, again, that it's innate. So cognition, when we're engaging the cognitive part of our brain, we say things like, I know how to, or I know. When it's the affective side, we tend to say things like, I like, I prefer. And when we're talking about conative, which is measured for the Kolbe, then we're speaking about the things we need and the things that we do. So it's a doing place, and it really comes from the way that we need to act, that we need to take action.
Hey, Pat,
So yes.
The interesting thing is I've learned, for me, when my Kolbe strength is really showing up, especially, I actually am, my whole body is in the I need. Like,
I need, yeah.
I need us to stop talking for a minute.
Yeah.
I need us to think about something at a bigger picture.
Yeah, so it's interesting, if we watch our language, it actually will help us to discern which part of our brain we're actually engaging at any one time. So this is a really useful way of thinking about it, and recognizing also that the Kolbe is measuring one set of strengths related to problem solving. There are many other strengths that you bring to the world, but this particular tool measures the problem solving strengths. So I'm going to have Francisca talk us through a couple of aspects of the model so that you'll understand what we're talking about as we really describe the Kolbe and how it works for us.
Yes, thank you, Peg. And Beth, I loved your comment about, well, not being able to help yourself, but I need to do this or ask for, let's please go on. And if you stay on the call with us, then later on you will probably learn why it is Beth particular comment. Because, you know, we are really talking about behavior, about observable behavior. And that is driven by instinct. When we get to approach a problem, start a project, when there's some kind of performance actually required from us. And so the way Kolbe is helping us understand that, framing that, they are providing us with these 4 action modes to start with. So there are 4 areas, and they are listed here. The area of factfinder, that relates to how we are used to gathering and sharing information. And it is in fact a reference for our need to have specific information, to go into investigation. Also relates to our need to setting priorities. And we can have that need less or more. I'll come back to that later. And there's no right or wrong. It's just what it is, because it is just coming from the inside of you. Now, the other 3 action modes are, there's follow through, and follow through relates to how we are arranging and designing. And it is a reference for our need to have a system, or maybe to design a system. Do we need a plan? Do we feel an intrinsic need to put a pattern, to see a pattern, to put it in sequence? And then again, we can have that need less or more. The third one here, mentioned here, is QuickStart, and that relates to how we deal with risk and uncertainties. And it is a reference for things are happening. It's a reference to what, if we have a need to improvise, or maybe less. And then the 4th action mode is called implementer. And that one relates to how we handle space and tangibles. And it is a reference for instance, our need to demonstrate hands-on or to build things, to handle equipment, that kind of things. And well, I already mentioned that in each action mode, so you can have this lesser or more tendency to jump into it, and that immediately leads us to this next part of the frame that Kolbe is presenting for us, and it's called the operating zones. And so in each action mode, we can be resisting, or we can be willing to respond, or we can really initiate in that area. So there are three operating zones. You can also scale from 1 to 10, and there's absolutely no measure of value. It's more an indication of where you are in which operating zone. Because it's all good, it's all perfect, it's all a strength. You've heard us say that before. Let me give an example. Let me just give me one.
Did I move too fast?
Yeah, too fast.
All right, there you go. That's easy.
Example to make it more clear, for instance, in the action mode of following through, one person may be initiating in that area. All of us are initiating in one area and likely to be accommodating or preventing problems in other areas. But going back to the example of initiating in follow through, that would be the person who would make a plan. Another person who would be in the zone of accommodating would be following the plan and be willing to operate within the bandwidth of the procedures. Whereas a third person who is in the preventing problems operating zones is very helpful at identifying, hey, we are getting boxed in the plan now, so we'll prevent that team or group from getting boxed in, and open up to different ways. Okay, well,
Francisca, I think that's funny because when I look at your example, my shorthand would be, which is a strength, we'll talk about that in a minute, is the initiating, the will is, here's the plan. The willing is, so great, we have a plan. And the preventative resistant is, we don't need a plan.
yes.
Right, and the other thing that I would add to that, Francisca, is what I appreciate so much about those who reside in the prevent resist part of follow through is their ability to streamline, like to say, oh, this thing takes 10 steps. No, we could actually do it in 6. Yeah. And to take the complexity out of things and find sort of the straighter path to getting things done. So I think that's for me, that's a huge benefit. And I rely on my partners who do that when I know I've put my thought into something and I may have, it may be complete for me and have way more than somebody else would need. So my partners who have that ability to sort of streamline and cut to the chase are really beneficial in being able to make sure that we haven't sort of over-architected something.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So ideally, we have all of these operating zones presented on a team. It's impossible to have inside of yourself because you have one preference for a certain operating zone in an action mode, but we need each other and preferably to have a balanced team, yes, in the different zones. So the easy math is 4 action modes times 3 operating zones leads to 12 strengths. And strengths are being presented here by labels, and it's obvious that beyond these labels there is a whole wealth of wisdom and a lot of information. But the keywords are listed here. I'm not going to go into detail, but maybe repeat it. Everyone has a strength in each mode. Mm-hmm. And the combination of strengths in each mode leads to a 4-figure result. And that is called, in Kolbe language, our modus operandi. And because of all the combinations, there's a multitude of combinations that shows in the difference that how people are operating. And talking about the difference, how different we are operating, and talking about having the different operating zones on a team. This may be a good segue, Peg, to enter into the next conversation.
Right. Yeah, so I want to just mention a couple of things about the 12 strengths. We've said it enough times that it's probably well worn now, but I do want to emphasize every single number, every single box is a strength. We love using this individually because it gives folks a real insight into who they are, and it's really helpful within a team because I don't know about your experience as you're listening, but I know plenty of teams we've worked with, and myself included, sometimes our frustration is when people aren't just like us. Like, the world would work so much better if everybody was just like me. And when we present the Kolbe, we can really begin to see like, oh, there are actually strengths other people have that are very different than mine. And our trick as a team is to figure out how do we'll use that word again, leverage all of those strengths. So it's really, really great to be able to see where the differences show up and then play to everyone's strengths to get the best outcome. So with that, per Francisco's request, we'll pop to applying Kolbe in real life, because if you're listening to this, my guess is you're wondering, so how does this really work every day? How do people take this information and put it into play? So what you see on the screen now are the Kolbe MOs, as Francisco said. That's the modus operandi. That's your combination of the 4 different scores that you might have in factfinder, follow-through, QuickStart, and implementer. And you'll see those for each of the 3 of us that are up on the screen now. And I thought a place to start might be to have each of us describe just in a few sentences, you know, not long, but just a brief explanation of how does that just series of numbers translate into who you are and how your Kolbe shows up. And Beth, I'm going to start with you for obvious reasons to us, but I'm going to start with you and see if you would just quickly describe yourself from the MO of Kolbe and that particular perspective.
Absolutely. So the scores there, 3, 4, 9, 3. So 3 is the fact finder. And what that means is I tend to like the facts. I don't like a lot of facts. So I want things bottom lined. For years in my career as a leader, people would come in. I remember this one example. They would bring in like a report this thick and hand it to me, and I would look at that and say, "What is this?" And they'd say, "Well, this is the marketing results." And I'd say, "So what? Like, where's the executive summary on this?" Like, they expected me to actually read the entire report, which was not going to happen. It's just an example. Give me the exec summary. Give me the facts. If I'm hungry for more, if it doesn't smell right, I'll dig in. The other thing in terms of the scores, you know, I accommodate in follow through. So follow through is important. I don't have a lot of energy in that area, but my simple follow through energy is just put it back. So in my life, you know, raising children with my sons and my husband, my follow through strategy is, look, it's always going to be there if you just put it back. You know, it boggles my mind that is not a simple strategy.
Yeah.
But the other one that's probably most, you know, differentiating on this slide is the 9 QuickStart. So for me, as an initiating QuickStart, and a 9 is a pretty high score as an initiator. I have very high tolerance for risk. 1, you know, and 1 for me is a pattern. You know, I like to then say, okay, let's go with that. Like I'm actually willing to, I'm willing to build the rocket ship on the way to the moon, knowing that we can figure it out.
Yeah.
Or believing we could figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. So Francisca, how about you? Would you give us a brief summary of your MO?
Yes, so you can see, or what one can see is from my 7 in fact finding is that I am initiating solutions in fact finding mode. So whenever I'm presented with a challenge, I need to start with finding facts, finding information. If I that into my creative modus. So I get stuck, and I've long thought that something was wrong with me because people would tell me I wasn't spontaneous, I wasn't creative, whatever, all that sort of judgments. So I was also very happy to discover this Kolbe wisdom that helped me see, hey, I'm actually doing something right, but I need to take an approach that fits with me and not with somebody else. Well, I need to have facts first. And then I need to have like a plan of approach. I need to see where did we come from, where are we now, where are we going through. I need to see the pattern, I need to see the flow, and from that I can see a strategy. And that's actually, it's almost a spin-off of doing
yeah.
Then I see the strategy. Then I go to the QuickStart action mode, and that is about my, I'm a 4 that is in the middle operating zone. So I am able to go with changes, with trying things, but not for the sake of a change. So if the moment I've seen that there is a movement for a good reason, I'm more than ready to jump into the unknown and see what I can, how I can contribute. And then finally, my contribution, and that comes in the implementer action mode, is it's a 2. It's meaning that I do not have a big need to build things with my hand or to demonstrate hands-on. My tendency is to picture in my mind and share my vision. And then hopefully there's someone else who is going to do the work. And this is funny. This has played out in my personal situation over time. When it came to house projects, for instance, we always had this challenge about, okay, painting needs to be done. Who is going to do it? We need to do it. So it became my responsibility. But it's only after learning about Kolbe that I could see, I like to envision how it looks like when it's painted. But it's really, it's a challenge for me to actually organize that project and do that hands-on doing, although I can still paint, of course. If I'm giving a brush, it's no problem. I even like it. But this is the logic that I find back in my life.
Right. Great. So I'll follow up and say my scores are 7 in follow through, which I mean in factfinder, which means that's where I initiate problem solving. And what it looks like for me is when I hear an issue or a problem to be solved, I immediately think, do we have the information we need? If not, where do we get the information we need? I also ask myself the question, have I ever solved a problem like this before, and how does that inform what I might do going forward? So I do have a past orientation in terms of how have I ever done this before, and that's helpful. And if I haven't, then that's a different kind of problem solving for me. Actually, in terms of the order for me, the next place for me to go typically actually is QuickStart. I'm a 5 in QuickStart, which means I accommodate there, but I'm usually looking to see if we have 10 great ideas, which are the 3 or 4 that feel like they have the most merit, which will support the direction we're going, fit with what we're already doing, and feel like they make the most sense. And then the next thing I'm going to do is on the follow through is sort out how does it fit in our plan. I am someone who likes to have a plan, but I also like the flexibility of knowing that if circumstances change, new data becomes available, new information enters into the picture, that we have the ability to change the plan, that it's flexible. So I like to know it's there. I really like the security of knowing there's a plan, but I also appreciate where we can be flexible in how we use the plan. Like Beth, I'm also a 3 in implementer. Which means that, like Francisca, I envision the solution. I envision physically, like if I wanted a bookcase in my living room, I would have a pretty good idea probably of what I wanted it to look like, how big it should be, what color it should be. But you will never find me at the Home Depot buying the wood and measuring it and cutting it and putting it together and staining it. That's not going to be the thing I would do. I would find somebody who could do that and do it well and do it easily and have them do it to my specifications. So I would know what I want, but I'm not going to be the one to jump in. The thing I'll point out on implementer is that a lot of folks get confused because they can see there are things I like to do that are hands-on. Like I like to garden and I like to cook. The question becomes, do you want to do that full-time as a job, or is that more of a hobby or an avocation? So we all have implementer energy, so it doesn't mean we never can do anything that requires hands-on, but we'll each probably find like some niche, some place that we like to do that, but it's not something we would want to do full-time all the time. And that's true for a lot of the other dimensions as well. So let's, I'm going to take this off the screen so it's not distracting. And then let's talk a little bit about other ways that the Kolbe shows up in our day-to-day life. So let's start with factfinder. So here's my question. Is there ever a situation where there are too many facts?
Every situation.
That was a plant.
I don't even know what questions you're coming with. I'm going to find the answer.
Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago, you came, Beth, you came to the Netherlands to visit and have a couple of business meetings, and I had prepared a pretty detailed plan for you about whom to see, where the person was in the organization, what the organization, and so forth and so forth. And you took a look and you put it aside and said, oh yeah.
So Francisca, what happens for you as an initiating fact finder when you don't get enough data?
I get to procrastinate. I just don't get going.
Yeah.
The creative process doesn't start. I get nowhere. I need to have it. Yeah.
You need to have that information.
Yeah.
I would say the one thing that I know I have to be tuned into, and I certainly don't always remember it as a fact finder, particularly in a world where on our team, we have initiating fact finders, Francisca and I, and then we have other folks who fall on the other spectrum, anywhere from accommodate to resist in fact finding. I have to remember that, well, I need the data, so I should not cheat myself on having the data that I need. I need that data. That helps me to feel like I have the information I need to make the decision, like we're making a good decision, a credible decision. But when I go to share it, I have to put a screen or a filter on that says, who's my audience and how much information do they need? Because they don't need as much information as I do. And so I'm always kind of in that, not dilemma, but I'm always looking to see, am I giving, I call it the Goldilocks solution. You know, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, not too much, not too little, just right. And so there's always for me kind of this interesting place where I'm trying to land on what's the just right amount of information for our team, knowing that I'm not going to make the mark every time. Like invariably, I'll put something out and somebody will have a question. I'll think, well, I could have given that, but then somebody else would say, oh my gosh, you're burying me information. So it's always an interesting dance to like find the right level of communication information for the team.
Yeah. One of the things I would like to point out right here when you're talking about this, in our work with women's leadership development programming, one of the things that we hear a lot is that women who are high fact finders or high follow through, what we mean by high, I mean initiating, not high.
Right, thanks.
Fact finder and follow through. They actually are like labeled as being too tactical and not strategic. And that is something that we actually argue against, because this is strategic. You are coming from a strategic play. You are using your strengths in a strategic way. And what you just described about knowing how to communicate it, what we do is we coach the women, don't change. You start with your strength. You absolutely must start with your strength. However, if you're giving a presentation or whatever, know your audience as you're recommending, and then talk in bullets and drill down. And I joke and say, don't have a PowerPoint presentation more than 8 slides. I should probably say it's not a joke. I actually mean it. Do 8 slides. You can have 15 in the appendix if you want.
Right.
You know, so it's like helping the women actually show up as their strategic strength is so useful.
Well, and it's interesting because the word that Kolbe uses as to describe an initiating fact finder is strategize. And it's strategize with numbers and information. So it clearly is a piece of who you are, but it also is being like, for all of us, understanding how do I leverage that strength effectively, not only to get what I need to get done, but then also to work with and communicate with others. And I think that's a really important thing that we want to say here is like, always be to your strength, but be tuned into the strengths of those around you. So let's shift to follow through a little bit. So I always find it fascinating when we do this with teams and we'll ask questions like, how organized is your kitchen? And we'll get, we'll get the folks who are initiating follow-throughs will say, oh, everything in my kitchen is organized, all the spices are labeled. And the people who resist in follow-through are going like, really? Oh my God, I couldn't imagine doing that. So it goes to the need piece of what we've talked about, like the people who like need that level of organization. I say about myself that I aspirationally want to be more organized than I am. I have an aspiration towards a higher level of organization than I'm always able to actually accomplish. I'm pretty organized, but as in terms of what would be in my ideal life, it would look more organized than it actually is. And so, I know that I'm an accommodator, I'm right in the middle. So of course that's where I would fall. Like it is what it is, and I'd love for it to be more. So Francisca, for you, how would you describe organization showing up in all aspects of your life, not just your professional life, but your personal life?
I am initiating solutions. I am sort of then making the plan and putting the pieces together. But I can also, I think I've learned to live also without a plan. So this is interesting how your primary Kolbe drive, how it also how it can sometimes show up differently in life, because you have learned to behave in a different way for whatever reasons. If I were completely free to be and do and have both personal and private life, I would be much more organized than I actually am. When you look at my desk, there's a lot of stuff on my desk because I want it to be in reach. So I'm an horizontal organizer. I have all these stacks of paper, and I pretty much know what where is. So in my mind, it's organized. Maybe for the visual, it may not seem so organized for the one who's in my office, but in my mind, in my experience, I know where everything is. Yeah.
Yep. And Beth, what's your need for organization?
Well, I need to have organization, but I sum it up as like, I will save the documents that I need to save, but I'm not able to retrieve them when I need them.
That's interesting.
And that frustrates me. It's like, that's to your point about, I should be more organized. It's because I know I saved it. I wasn't an idiot. I didn't throw this away, but where is it? So that kind of sums it up.
I also associate you, Beth, with all these sticky notes. I mean, all colors and sticky notes everywhere.
But the flip side of that for you that I see is the way you approach your home is you do not like tchotchkes, you don't collect stuff, you don't like stuff hanging around. So your home physically is very streamlined. When I see it, it's very streamlined. And I think that very much suits and fits your level. That keeps it organized without you having to put a lot of energy into organizing it.
Right. It's funny things like over the holidays, my mother or mother-in-law might give me holiday towels or something, right? Use this again next year. There's no way I'm going to use them again next year. I don't remember where I put them, but I know.
Right. A year later, who knows? So I think this whole thing around organizing, the other thing I want to underscore is that this idea of follow through is around organizing anything and everything. So it could be organizing data, it could be organizing things, it could be organizing time. So anything that might fall into a category that could be organized or a pattern is something that might reflect your follow through and where you are in that operating zone for follow through. So, it goes just beyond. I'm always, for example, I'm amazed at the programs that we have in the States on, do-it-yourself, fix-it things, and they'll show the people that'll go into like a space that is just like stuff literally everywhere, and the organizer can see clear, and 3 days later, it's pristine and beautiful and organized. And there's a certain way that your mind thinks to be able to do that. And so I see it as, this really interesting kind of far-reaching view of organization, goes beyond stuff. It actually expands to virtually anything and everything in your life. All right, so let's talk about QuickStart, because this is one that's an interesting one in terms of balancing it off in a team, because I think you will often have the benefit, if you're lucky enough like our team to have as many initiating QuickStarts. Brainstorming is easy for our team. Coming up with new ideas is super easy for our team. That is not a challenge at all. So Beth, talk a little bit about how your QuickStart energy shows up.
Well, I would say the QuickStart energy, it shows up, I joke and say, I've never had an idea about, an idea that I didn't love, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I can't stop the ideas and the creative solutions. I also don't have to be an expert in a topic to have an opinion or an idea. And, they are just generated. Now, what I've learned for myself is I can't be attached that other people love and appreciate the idea. I have to absolutely manage that. And in a brainstorming meeting, when you combine a strong personality and a lot of creative ideas, you also have to be careful that you're not just, steamrolling, through the process.
Right.
So Francisca joked about some of the Post-it notes. It's one of the ways that I actually do manage myself is that, and you guys see this all the time in me, I always have Post-it notes in front of me. As I'm getting ideas, I jot them down.
Yeah.
If it's relevant to add on, I add on. If it's not, I just kind of crumble it and move it away. And at the end of the meeting, that's my process to remember how many, or are there other ideas that you need to touch base on?
Yeah. Francisca, how do you feel about winging it? Like just, trying something new without giving it a lot of thought. How does that land for you?
I cannot do it without the fact finding. So I need to have the basic facts. I am accommodating in QuickStart, and I can be creative and brainstorming, but I need a certain basis. And it's very helpful for me to have people on the team, have others on the team with these primary ideas. So with after a first conversation, then I can satisfy my fact finding and my planning needs, and then I can bounce off those ideas and bring it to the next step.
And so Beth, same question. How do you feel about just winging it? Like an idea comes up and just go with it.
Absolutely. Like we moved into a house a year ago, and I just had this vision for what I wanted. I saw it, and I just, told the guys to knock down the wall. And they were like, where are the architect's plans? And I'm like, we'll figure that out. But I think if we just take this wall out, right? So the risk tolerance, which is what an initiating QuickStart really describes, is I have a high risk tolerance. If I make a mistake, I'll just course correct. Like it's not a stumbling block. It's, let's try something new. And that's useful, but I also have to pair up with people who do the planning.
Yeah.
That's the thing that's important, because QuickStarts left to their own, we make great entrepreneurs, that's for sure. But, in terms of generating new things, but if we don't have the other strengths and we're not surrounding ourselves with, other strengths, we can run ourselves right off a cliff.
Yeah, and I think the thing I would add to that, and because we don't have anyone here who is a resistant QuickStart between the three of us, but the resistant QuickStart, the quick descriptor from Kolbe is stabilize. And that's a really great word, because what a resistant QuickStart does is they will not change for the sake of change. Francisca mentioned that. They won't change just for the sake of change because something sounds new and interesting, and let's give that a go. And they often do get tagged as change resistant, and they're actually not. It's just that they want to be clear that if the change makes sense, that it's been vetted, that we know what we're doing, that we have a more than reasonable chance of success. So one of the things that we try to make sure is that someone who's a resistant QuickStart recognizes how to bring that strength forward without it sounding like, they just got planted their feet and won't change. Because otherwise you get a bad rap for that. And that's another place where you get the rap of being too tactical, not being strategic enough. And it's really a terrific use of your strength. And to your point, in entrepreneurial organizations, if you go back and you track entrepreneurial organizations that have failed, often it's because it's too much QuickStart energy not balanced off by enough resistance, so that there isn't someone saying, whoa, hold it, let's stop and make sure, let's slow the process down a little bit to make sure we're doing the right thing. So all of these things, to the points we've been making, every one is a strength, and just recognizing how you use that strength in a way that really makes good sense.
Yeah.
Anybody want to add anything on implementer? Because, you know, we're all three sitting here as resistant implementers. I am married. Well, Beth is married to somebody who is Gary accommodating or initiating implementer?
He's an initiator. He's factfinder and implementer.
Yeah.
I would just say this about it. I'll just do it really quick. In a previous house where we were doing some construction, Gary I said to him, I wanted a TV on the counter. And so he said, I could do that. I said, okay, great. Otherwise I'll call someone. So he spent his Saturday trying to figure it out. And I come walking through the kitchen and I see he's like really, you know, kind of struggling with something. And I looked at him, and he's gonna just stay on this until he figures it out. He's not gonna call in some help at all.
Right.
And I know that's gonna be the pattern. So I said to him, look, first of all, you know I don't know anything about what you're doing, so disclaimer. But could I offer a suggestion? And he said, yeah. I said, well, why wouldn't it work if you just like, you know, threw something down there and see where it landed and da 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 da. And he looked at me and he said, okay, that's a stupid idea. However, it does help. And then he went off on his own and did something else. And to me, it does two things. It symbolizes the way you can leverage each other. Like it's not my strength. I don't know that. Yeah. But if you're willing to listen to somebody else, as they can provide you with a different perspective, it will get you from spinning your wheels and actually be in your productive mode.
Yeah, actually, that's a great example of what you said earlier around, as an initiating QuickStart, you may have ideas even about things you don't know anything about, which isn't facetious, but what you did is you brainstormed, and it wasn't the right idea, but it actually helped Gary get off the dime in terms of so focused on one way of getting it done that he could now see another possibility. Right. And that's really, really helpful. I think from me, I'm, you know, married to somebody who's a high accommodating implementer, and my husband's an architect, so it's actually not a surprise. You know, he actually can't talk with you if he's not drawing you a picture. He thinks visually. That's how he operates. And so we actually complement, because I have ideas that Chuck is more than willing to go do that, you know, I may not always have the energy to fulfill on and complete. The danger there is that he will want to implement on things that he also doesn't know enough about and have expertise in. So I've had to learn when and how to engage him in those questions. So our time is really coming to a close. It's been a great conversation. We could talk more about all of this. But here's what I'd love to offer. One is, if you're listening and you're intrigued and you think, oh, you know, this could be really helpful, I'd love to know how to do this too. We have a special offer on our website, which is www.tiara leadership.com. And if you go to that /purchase, you'll see an offer for having your Kolbe done with an hour-and-a-half debrief. It's normally $375. We're offering it for $199. It's on the website. We'll include a link in the Facebook, you know, dialogue underneath the actual link when it comes out. So that would be great, and we'd be happy to do that with you, because we found, even if you know what you are personally, boy, it's sure helpful to have that own insight. The other thing we'd encourage you to do is to go to the website, you know, scope us out, go to our Facebook page and like us. And when you do that, then every week you'll get a notice of when we're about to go Facebook Live. So if you love these conversations and you want to be part of them, or you want to have access to them later, like us on Facebook, and every week you'll know when we're about to tee up and talk. Anything else that Beth or Francisca that you want to add before we wrap it today?
Yes, I would like to say that knowing our strengths and knowing when and how to use them is a key part of not just the awareness, but it's how we produce results with ease. Mm-hmm. That is one of the other reasons why we love the Kolbe so much. It ties so much to our model. And as we say, we live the model, and this really helps people understand that at a professional level with your team, but even with your team at home and your team friends or your team family. And it personalizes some of that. Why are they so? Yeah. It's because they are. They are. Yes. More than I can help it. So I think that's an important reminder.
Yeah, it's a great reminder. Anything else, Francisca, that you want to add before we sign off today?
I completely echo that.
Great. Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. If you love this conversation, please come back next week. We'll be here, same time, same place. Bye-bye. Have a great afternoon or evening or morning, whatever it is for you.
Bye-bye.